Yo, I was just first and foremost, today is 9/11. It's definitely a day to commemorate and reflect on the lives that was lost. Over 3,000 people's lives was lost on 9/11. You ask yourself, where were you on 9/11? 2001, where were you? Were you in junior high school, high school? Were you in elementary? Were you still in diapers? Where were you? Me, I was in the Army. I was enjoying my life in the Army, my time in the Army. It was a lot more freedom of motion, freedom of movement in the Army up until a point when 9/11 happened. And the first tower collapsed or was hit, however you want to look at it. In the morning, it was like 11 something in the morning, Eastern Standard Time, meaning that a lot of soldiers was at lunch. A lot of soldiers was at lunch. We generally get about an hour and a half of lunch, 11:30 to 1300 hours or 1 o'clock p.m. You got to be back there. Of course, be early. You know what I mean? When you coming back from lunch, 15 minutes prior back from lunch, whatever the case is, right? So, like, I was in uniform. Me and my man, we were on Yakin Road, and I was looking for a car to buy. Like, I was looking for a car. We got the word that we need to head back to our company areas immediately because of something that happened. I recall this lady coming out the dealership on Yakin Road, like hysterically crying, talking about the towers were hit. I recall later that day trying to get in touch with my family back home in New York. The cell phone shit was a new thing. At least the technology that we had for cell phones was kind of new. So a lot of cell phone towers was down, or I don't even know, but I couldn't make a phone call on my cell phone to get in touch with my family back in New York. So the shit was kind of distressing. I get back to my company, and I see NCOs, in the company, like one in particular doing something that I didn't think we were supposed to be doing. His response was, "We're going to war, so nothing don't matter," whatever the case is, right? Cool. But that's how my day went generally on 9/11. Now, fast forward a couple years later, you know what I'm saying, after the internet really started blossoming and you was able to kind of like search for what you were looking for. This is before the age of what and I hate to credit it, but what we all call fake news now. Like, it's this is before that time. This was in a time where the mainstream media, the CNNs, the Fox Newses, even some local, ABC News, Channel 7 type shit. Like, this is the news that we all look towards for some kind of truth and some kind of answers, right? But see, what the internet did was add a element of the news that we never seen before. We started seeing international news regularly. And if you was interested in that, you would follow through with the internet, with the international news, i.e. BBC News, you know what I'm saying? Al Jazeera News and shit like that. You also had YouTube coming up. YouTube, I see why YouTube is a major platform to this day, because they were there, allowing people to share their footage of what they called news, share what their footage of what they called life. And so YouTube was obviously one of the first major platforms that people was able to get on and show things from their own perspective to the rest of the world. You didn't have to be a journalist. You didn't have to be you didn't have to be, in the media, in the media. You didn't have to be none of that. All you did was have to have a camera and the ability to upload. So at that point, and this is debatable, of course, but at that point, I don't think that people was immediately trying to get on the internet and post fake shit. The fake shit came a little bit later. It came a little bit later. But initially, I think people was happy and enamored enough to, yo, I got a camera. I just seen this and I caught it on tape and I want to put it online. I think that's what it was. So it was just like raw footage. Even some of the media outlets weren't able to keep up with this raw footage from their own sources. For instance, around 9/11, they were in another country, London, Paris, wherever the BBC broadcast, one of them countries overseas. And this is Google, you could Google this shit if it's still there. You could Google this shit. The towers went down, and there was a journalist that had one of the towers went down, and a journalist reported that both of the towers had fell. So when that happened, whether it was a mistake or not, that kind of threw the people that was following online, it kind of threw us off, because this reporter had said that both towers had fell, and clearly they did not. This is not even accounting World Trade Center 7, that building 7 is not even accounting that. They talking about the tall towers. Them shits ain't collapsed yet. They already reported that both towers had fell, right? So it could have been a mistake. I'm not tripping off of that, but I'm just giving that as an example of how fast news came out on major networks, and the internet had already interpreted it in their own way. The internet had already absorbed that information. That person may have misspoke. Both towers had fell, whatever. Because when you talk about the World Trade Center, it sounds singular. It doesn't sound plural. So, and this person was overseas reporting. So, it could have been a mistake in terms of how that person was talking. So, just trying to play both sides. Not trying to feed into the conspiracy narratives or anything like that. Some of the earliest conspiracy narratives, not trying to do that. But what I will say is that the Young Turks and Alex Jones were some of the first YouTube news outlets that were really reporting on these events. I don't know any bigger outlets online that were reporting the way that they were reporting on 9/11 besides Alex Jones and the Young Turks. Now, Alex Jones's reporting on 9/11, I think, was monumental. And fast forward to this day, I think Alex Jones is a piece of shit. I think he peddles in conspiracy bullshit that is toxic to our society. I think he's over the years recognized that the truth doesn't matter. The truth doesn't matter. I think that when he was reporting on 9/11, again, just like some of those earlier journalists and some of those earlier individuals and entities that was just putting shit online, I don't think their intent was to bring fake news to the internet forum. That developed over time. But if you go back and look at some of Alex Jones's coverage of 9/11, it was amazing. But with that being said, me being a lot older, you know what I'm saying, 20 fucking years older, at the minimum 20 years older, like, in the way my mind has changed on my outlook of 9/11. Some things I still hold true. Some things I still believe in. Number one, I still believe that 9/11 was I used to believe that 9/11 was an inside attack. I believe that it was an inside attack. What I believe now, and I wholeheartedly believe, I believe that it was an attack that the United States knew about it. They knew that attack was coming. And I say that because if you look at some of the earlier narratives from Condoleezza Rice, some of the generals, Colin Powell, Bush at the time, Dick Cheney, and all of these folks that was giving official statements on the events of 9/11 and what led to it, and the 9/11 report and all that shit. Like, when you really look at that shit to this day, you could see that they were hiding something. They were trying to mislead the public purposely. And one of the narratives was, Bush is trying to go into Iraq to, and see, I said Iraq, and that's crazy because Iraq didn't have nothing to do with this shit. But either way, that was just a narrative. Bush is trying to make up for his father's failures in Iraq and in the Middle East. They needed a reason to go into the Middle East and do some shit. And that's what happened. I still believe that to this day. There's no, it'll be hard to change my mind 20 years later. I've been harboring these ideas for years. I've expressed these ideas for years to, colleagues, friends, family. I've definitely expressed these feelings. There's no changing that because, again, when the internet was first really popping, nobody really looked towards the internet or YouTube or whatever to put fake content up there. That came later. No doubt it did. No doubt it did. So even Alex Jones was up there expressing his findings. Even Alex Jones, the nigga that we know to this day that spreads misinformation about COVID-19. He spreads misinformation about some current conflicts, the current administration, the administration before, number 45. He spreads a bunch of stuff about them that's like straight up misleading, straight up fake news, straight up false, straight up politically aligned with, his particular, political brand. Like, that's what Alex Jones does today. He pushes these fake vitamins. He says, yo, take this vitamin because it'll protect you against Satanism or whatever. Like, you see what Alex Jones does today. So, that's him. That's him. And I can't fuck with him. I can't fuck with him because I've seen with my own two eyes as a 40-year-old man that at the time was very interested in what happened on 9/11. I was very interested in that day because I was already in the service, and I wanted to know, once my battalion commander said, less whore, more doer, and it's not a matter of if but when we deploy. I wanted to know why I was going to deploy. And in the military, a lot of people, a lot of leaders don't really get into the nitty gritty of why we doing things. They don't get into the nitty gritty of why. And it sometimes, to me, felt taboo to even ask why, especially at those times. Salute to a lot of these young soldiers that's coming up. A lot of these new young leaders that ask these questions. Why? Salute to them. In my era, for me personally, I really didn't ask too many questions. I just did what I was told to do. That's just me. Fucked up? Maybe, maybe not. I felt obligated to do what the fuck I was told to do, whatever I was trained to do. That's what I did. Like it or love it, that's what I did. So, with that being said, the events of 9/11, just looking at the way everything took place. We have sketchy images of a plane hitting, the first tower. I'm not saying which one, Tower 1 and 2. The first tower that was hit, we have sketchy images of that. I truly believe that that was an aircraft. After all these years, I believe that that was an actual aircraft that hit the buildings, right? I believe another aircraft hit the second building. I believe that World Trade Center 7, I believe they imploded it. And to double back on what I'm saying about those events, I believe that there were terrorist attacks that took place, but I believe that people knew that these attacks were coming. If you look back at January of 2001, February, early 2001, and you analyze Condoleezza Rice's statements in those hearings and those briefings or whatever you want to call it at the, levels beyond the Pentagon or whatever. And, this was in the media because they wanted to put it in the media for whatever reason. They thought they had intelligence that said that bin Laden was bound to strike the United States. And they even listed certain means of him striking the United States. They included aircraft. They included a couple other, projectile items that he would potentially use, but it ended up being the aircraft. They knew that shit was coming. When you look at the World Trade Center and how it was built, you go back to some of that footage from the early 70s and stuff like that, and you hear some of the accounts of the folks that was building. They literally said these buildings were made to withstand the impact of an aircraft, a Boeing, something as large as a Boeing. Like, they were made to withstand that because they were so tall, and that the possibility was very slim that an airplane would hit these things, but anything can happen. Human error can occur. And somebody that's a pilot that's flying an aircraft can accidentally hit the towers. And they wanted to make sure that that structure was created and made to withstand that impact. On 9/11, when those planes hit the towers, the narrative was, well, the jet fuel burned at such a high temperature that it compromised the structure of the beams, thus the building collapsed. Those buildings were hundreds of feet, hundreds of floors tall. When that building collapsed, Out of all the floors, there was maybe just a couple floors left. So you saying that jet fuel burned, that jet fuel burned or dripped all the way down to the lowest beams and were ignited, therefore burning the metal, the steel beams, melting them and that fast, like melted the beams that fast to where the building looked like it was imploded. That's what we saying. That's the narrative. And some people believe that narrative. I don't believe it. I could be right, I could be wrong, but I don't believe that narrative. That's just me. In the military, you know, when you join the military, we all become experts and shit like that. It's not true, but that's what we feel about ourselves. We experts, right? We know how, and no, we didn't do the science behind how flammable jet fuel was. But because of some of our experiences in the military dealing with, at the time, it was called JP-8. That was the fuel that we used. That was the diesel substitute that we used. It was military grade diesel that we used in our vehicles, and in our, you know, our aircraft and stuff like that. Towards my later years in the military, you know, they changed the name, and I don't know the fucking name or whatever the case is right now off the top of my head. If I think hard, I probably, but anyway, you could put a cigarette out in fucking JP-8. A gallon of JP-8, you could put a fucking cigarette out. Oh, don't smoke here. That was just the precautions. Don't smoke near the gas pump, the fuel pump. Don't do that. You know, don't smoke in areas where refueling operations are taking place. That was just a precaution. But the amount of heat that it would take to ignite JP-8 is beyond a gallon of JP-8 in a cigarette butt. Like, it's beyond that. And we understand the magnitude of, you know, the planes carrying X amount of jet fuel, and, you know, it hit the planes hitting and then like causing that explosion, leading to the plane, you know, the JP-8 igniting and creating a fire and blah 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 blah. Like, first and foremost, look at the goddamn footage of when them planes hit. There was an initial explosion. There was small fire. There were fires. You know, when I say small, that's relative to the size of the building. There were fires that broke out. But there was not enough heat. There was not enough fire to make the whole fucking building implode. You look at the fucking footage. It's not possible. It's not possible. Then, around that time during 9/11, when they started putting that fucking narrative out there, the internet is now a thing. So we started Googling and looking up historical events. There was an event in Europe somewhere. You could Google this shit. Just Google tall buildings that collapsed or didn't collapse after, you know, severe fire. They had a building in one of these European countries that burned for like really ablaze, like nothing was left but the structure, and the shit was ablaze for like hours to days in a row, and a building did not fucking collapse in that manner. So me personally, as somebody that really was on the internet during those times, looking at that footage, being in the military, I never believed that those planes caused those buildings to fucking collapse. When you look at floors being blown out, smoke coming out of floors several feet below the initial impact, the initial explosion, you seeing floors being blown the fuck out. And then we always want to salute our first responders, our medical paramedics, and our fire departments and stuff like that. But we still to this day overlook the fact that people were on the ground explaining and talking about their experience. One dude's like, the towers came down and all we heard was boom, 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 boom. People saying they heard loud explosions in the basement. I'm not feeding into the conspiracy bullshit. I'm just saying that around that time, and motherfuckers had raw footage and raw accounts of what happened. We're not looking into those statements by those people that was really fucking there. I ain't talking about no motherfucker that flew in from DC to help clean up and Mayor Giuliani bitch ass. You know what I mean? I ain't talking about these. I'm talking about motherfuckers that was there on a fucking ground. And then we let Mayor Giuliani fucking tell the story. Mayor Giuliani just as bad as motherfucking Alex Jones is to this fucking day. And I ain't respect him back in the day as a mayor. That's just me. So we allow these other narratives, 20 plus years worth of narrative, to reshape our thought process and reshape the shit that we seen and heard with our own fucking eyes and 2 fucking ears. Are we fucking kidding? Like, we don't want to know shit, man. We don't want to know shit. And to the fucking soldiers that was overseas around that time, that's going into a whole nother story. But we know what Halliburton was and who Halliburton was as an entity, as a company. Who ran Halliburton? We know that. Out of all the rubble, they found the passports intact enough, legible enough to be read and say, hey, these people were from whatever fucking country that they said. I think they even initially said that people were from Pakistan. So we found passports on the fucking ground at 9/11 that said that these people were from Pakistan. But yet we blame Afghanistan, we blamed Iraq, shit like that. That's what we did. Meanwhile, Pakistan is our quote-unquote ally. Fast forward, where was Osama bin Laden found? He was found in Pakistan. When them soldiers had him cornered within a 24-hour time gap an operations gap that would have took about 24 fucking hours. They had them cornered, and they reported that shit back. And somehow, some way, they were told to stand down. And Bin Laden escaped in the mountains, through the mountains, and went to Pakistan. This is what we talking about, man. This is what we talking about. I ain't feeding into no narrative, what the media said and all that fucking bullshit. You read the 9/11 report your fucking self and see the inconsistencies in there. 9/11 report just as inconsistent as the motherfucking Bible. The fuck out of here. Some man-written, man-made shit that's labeled as official. The fuck out of here. You know? I could go on about this shit, man. 20 years. 20 fucking years. 3,000 souls lost. 3,000 plus souls lost. Every politician, for better or for worse, has used 9/11 as their political bargaining chip, their, I don't know. They use that shit. They try to make it better by putting up these memorials and putting the lights up every year since then. But they're not talking about the investigation that took place where the remaining steel that was still on fire, like still red hot. They took that steel and shipped that shit overseas. That molten fucking steel. You got people at the time that was credible saying that the only thing that could produce those kind of temperatures and those kind of like lasting temperatures on steel and those kind of thick ass beams, those thick ass beams that they use, the only thing that could do some shit like that is called thermite. And thermite is usually used in the demolition of a building. When you put the towers up against any other controlled demolition, controlled explosion, and you see the similarities, like, there's no other explanation. I don't give a fuck how scientific a motherfucker is, how smart they say they are. If they saying that, oh, those towers went down because that's just the way that they fell, it's bullshit. It's bullshit. So if I'm harboring on a conspiracy theory or whatever you want to call it, hey, I'ma just live with that. You know what I'm saying? I'ma live with that. I'ma live with that. And that's cool with me. But if y'all want to fucking live with the idea that this shit wasn't somehow, some way all connected in terms of a real terrorist attack that happened, but at the same time our government letting that shit happen, that's where we differ. That's where we differ. You can look back at, if they still had this shit online, you could look back at all of a sudden, you know, the guy that owned the World Trade Center, he was a Bush. He was a Bush. He was related to the Bushes. Yeah, look that up. He was related to the Bushes in a certain way. Nigga took out a fucking insurance policy the people that worked inside the Twin Towers, they told and they said a couple months prior to the events of 9/11, they started having these evacuation, fire drills. NORAD, North American Air Defense, damn near every fucking plane that they had that could respond to a aircraft veering off course, they were sent in the other direction for training purposes on the same day. If this should sound like a conspiracy, I could understand why you say that this is a conspiracy. But when NORAD sent their aircraft in the other direction on the same day as 9/11, as the planes hitting the towers, is the same thing as General Flynn's brother being inside during January 6th, telling people and recommending people not to respond in a certain manner. I'm not saying it was an inside job, but I'm just saying the coincidences are too big. There's no explanation for these kind of events. General Flynn, his brother, another General Flynn, is inside the DC area when those rioters decide to storm the Capitol. General Flynn, in his own way, professionally advising people not to respond to that. It's the same thing that happened on 9/11. And much more on 9/11. Much more. But people in professional, respected positions going against a better judgment to give advice. It's like if you ask me some shit and I normally give you a great answer, I normally give you sound advice, but this particular day I decide to tell you some other shit. And then you look back and say, God damn, he got me into some shit. That's what happened on 9/11, man. I'm gonna leave it at that. One.